So if I was ever forced to narrow it down and choose to have only one guitar effect, the only effect I could use for the rest of my days on this planet, I think I would have to go with a great reverb. I absolutely love to play with a properly dialed in reverb. It just gives our tones so much depth and dimension, shall we say. I don't know if those are the right words, but it just really does something to a tone that makes me want to keep playing. Now, obviously, reverb isn't for every style of tones. Sometimes a really close to bone dry tone is the best thing for certain mixes. But is there something we can do that maybe a lot of folks don't realize with their reverbs that may seem kind of extreme, or maybe we just wouldn't think of doing, that could possibly make them a little bit better, or maybe at least just different from how we would normally use it, and maybe open up some new doors? So today we're going to talk about using the low and high cut parameters, if our reverb has it, that is, and I believe most of the reverbs in the Helix do. So we're going to talk about what those do, because I find in my discussions with people over the years, those two parameters are something that most people just look at and don't touch. They think, oh, those are set fine by default. And, you know, for the most part, they are. There's nothing wrong with the way they're usually set up. But if we understand what they're doing, we can really have yet another powerful control over our reverbs to possibly make them sound even closer to what we're hearing in our head. So without further ado, we're going to jump over to Helix Native today. I'm working within Cubase, and we're going to take a look at what those parameters actually do within the reverbs. All right, so here we are over in Helix Native. I have this little simple 2-block preset set up using the Divided Duo amp at its default settings that pop up with the 112 US Deluxe cab. I did switch out the mic to a 160 ribbon on the cap edge, 3.25 inches back. Low and high cut set, as you see them here, 100 hertz and 10.5 kilohertz respectively. I do have a little dynamic room reverb. And again, this is just the default settings it comes up with. Let's just turn that off. And here is the sound. I'm playing my Vigier Expert Strat style guitar. This is the Divided Duo amp at those settings. What a great amp and great tone. So now if we just come on with the default settings, put our dynamic room reverb in there. Kind of just brings that tone to life. And I would be happy with those settings. But let's take a little closer look at what we can do here. Now, I've done videos before talking about all the controls. And a lot of times, folks, if they want a bigger reverb, they'll just come in here and they'll raise the decay up. And if they're not sensing their reverb enough, maybe they'll come in and they'll raise their mix up. Sometimes what can happen is the reverb can kind of start walking all over our tone. Well, a pre-delay can be good for that too. We could lengthen this so that our initial note doesn't have the reverb kind of engulf it. If we go to 100% mix, we can really hear what that does. The reverb jumps all over the note as soon as I hit it. Here I hit it and then it comes in. So having a longer pre-delay can really help our reverb kind of not walk all over. All right, so let's just leave our pre-delay somewhere around maybe 20 milliseconds, and we're just going to crank up our decay. Now, let's come to our low and high cut. Now, for this, I'm just going to turn the mix up to 100%, so there's no dry signal involved here. What's happened over the years, I've had a lot of folks ask me about these things, and I have some people tell me that they feel like, oh, the low and high cut, I'm not going to touch that because I don't want to affect my overall guitar tone. You got to realize something. This is not the same as adjusting a low and high cut in the cab block, which is obviously going to affect the overall guitar tone. This is only going to apply to the reverb signal. So if I have my mix on 0 and there's no reverb, it doesn't matter what I do to my low and high cuts. They're going to have no effect. because they're only going to affect what is going on the reverb tail. Now, if I bring my mix up to 100%, let's hear the difference. Kind of a darker reverb. I'll get rid of the high cut. Get rid of the low cut. Do you hear that low end on the reverb tail alone? Hear how it's gone now? All high end, and the same now. Listen to the high end of the reverb. Hear how dark it is now? So how can we use this? Well, it's not going to affect our tone. Like I said, if I come back here and just have a 30% reverb in here, I can go and do these dramatic... You do hear the darkening of the reverb, but you don't hear any effect on of the actual tone. So basically, a lot of times you'll see these set, maybe the lows are somewhere around 100, 150, and the highs are somewhere around, maybe 10 kilohertz. What if we were to bring this all the way up? Well, what's going to happen is now we have no high cut. It's just going to be a much brighter sounding. What that's going to do is probably make it cut in the mix a little bit more and be a little more obvious, but it could also have that reverb getting in the way of other elements in the mix, maybe cymbals and whatnot. But what if we wanted kind of a bigger reverb? And let's bring our mix back up to 100 here. You can see how that setting would be kind of more buried in the mix, right? So the lower we bring the high cut, it's going to basically make our reverbs darker and probably not quite as overt and obvious. So if we have a big setting and we've already got our pre-delay set in our mix where we want it, and you still find that maybe there's a high-end thing going on. And I find a lot of reverbs, if it's not a good quality reverb, that's where you hear it, is in the high end. So by rolling some of that back, you can clean up the mix and have that get out of the way of other elements in the mix. But it'll also make your guitar seem like maybe it's not quite as reverberated, and maybe help the guitar cut a little more while still giving it some weight of a reverb. So one really cool thing you can actually do here, let's first of all go to about a mix of 40% with this reverb here. It really softens that tone up. If I get rid of that, because that reverb is kind of engulfing our tone. But watch what happens if I do something really dramatic. Bring the high cut all the way down to 1 kilohertz and the low cut all the way up to 1 kilohertz. This seems kind of crazy because we're bringing them to the same setting, but listen now. We still have a really nice reverb that isn't taking up a whole bunch of sonic space, but it's still giving us a little bit of depth. But we're not losing any articulation on our original tone. Even though we have a really long decay and a fairly high mix, let's even go a little higher. If I was to do the same thing kind of with the low and high cut where it might normally be set, listen to the same settings. Now this might be exactly what you want if you're doing things like swells where you want a more overt reverb. But if we're playing something that maybe we don't want the sound swimming in the reverb, but we still want kind of a big reverb, we can really use that high and low cut to tailor things and we can get away with fairly big reverbs. Now, those are dramatic settings. Obviously, I'm going to extremes here. We could, go to slightly different settings. But you'll notice we kind of get that swimming and reverb effect back fairly quickly. So this was kind of an interesting setting to really get kind of a nice big reverb, but something that isn't going to walk all over our sound. So it's just another setting that maybe we wouldn't have thought of doing, but we could actually get a lot of mileage out of it. Now, obviously, this isn't going to be a setting that's going to work for everything, but it could work if we just are having a hard time in certain situations getting our reverb to sit just nicely. All right, what do you guys think? Just a little food for thought, something that maybe a lot of folks wouldn't have thought of doing, or maybe were scared to touch those parameters and didn't ever want to mess around with them, but I think we can see how powerful they can be. Instead of just going to our decay and our mix and maybe our pre-delay, those are all still really great tools for dialing our reverb, but now if we add the high and low cut to the equation, we see just how much more flexibility we could possibly have with our reverb. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Today, I'm going to leave you with the demo video for my 2204 Mod Ultimate preset, which is available, link below on my website if you're so inclined and want to grab that. It is there. There's also a free single snapshot version of it there. The full version is full-blown array of effects for the Helix, multiple snapshots, and I think it sounds really, really cool. So I'll leave you with that demo. I hope you enjoy it. If you want to go check out that preset, go to the link below. It is over there at my website. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please like the video. Please share with anybody you think would get some use or enjoyment out of watching it. And also please subscribe to the channel. Hit the little bell notification to get notified when I put new content out. I will be back really soon with some more. Thank you guys again so much for tuning in. Ciao for now.